Coming to you from the mountains and the plain, the only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire, going solo again today. Joe got pulled into another meeting. He will be back with us, though, early next week. But happy Friday. I know we're going to have a little bit of a rough time because right now we're competing against the President of the United States on Rush Limbaugh's show. So I know that we're going to have a hard time getting viewership today, but we're going to try anyway. And I want to make this an open line Friday. I want to pull from Rush Limbaugh and make this open line. And we've had some people call in the past couple days, and they've called in towards the end when we're about to end the show, so we couldn't take the calls. But I want to open it up now for calls. 888-441-1121. And the question of the day is it possible to be a conservative and vote for Biden? And by that I mean, if you vote for Biden, is it possible to still call yourself a conservative? And I've gone ahead and put up a poll on the Facebook live stream. Oh, Christy says that Trump's thing is over. Okay, so we'll have some viewership. How do you do? I heard he did okay. I heard that he was very disappointed in Bill Barr. So yeah, I'll have to listen to that afterwards. Couldn't really listen to it this morning. But our question is whether it is possible to vote for Biden and still be a conservative. And by that I mean, is it possible to call yourself a conservative and say, I'm voting against Trump because I don't like his tweets, when you know that by voting for Biden, you are voting for everything that conservative is supposed to be against? Like you go down the list of the so-called Republicans who have now endorsed Joe Biden. You look at Kasich, right? The fact that Kasich is endorsing Joe Biden proves that he never was a conservative. He never actually was. You go down the list of all these conservatives who are now voting for Joe Biden, and it's just really hard to square that circle. So we're going to go through today. Don't have any cuts. We don't have any of that. We're going to spend today going through Joe Biden's what he calls bold ideas. And we're going to ask whether it is possible to support that and call yourself a conservative at the same time. So let's go ahead and get started. The issue that, to me, sits first and foremost out there, and again, call in 888-441-1121. Answer that question. Let me know what you think about that question. Is it possible to be a conservative and vote for Biden at the same time? 888-441-1121. So let's talk about abortion. When the Supreme Court issued its Roe versus Wade ruling in the 70s, it had a key part of it that said, if a baby has not yet reached the point of viability, a mother has a right to terminate a pregnancy. But if the baby has become viable, meaning if a baby is able to survive outside the womb with or without medical intervention, that's important. When the Supreme Court defined viable, it was defined as being able to survive outside the womb with or without medical assistance. Once you hit that point of viability, you cannot have an abortion because a baby being viable has the right to life. That's what the Supreme Court said. Once the baby reaches the point of viability, you cannot, in good conscience, have an abortion. At least for elective reasons. They've kind of massaged that over the years to come up with other exceptions to allow for medically necessary. And we can talk about that, I guess, the idea of there's no such thing as a medically necessary abortion. At least in my mind. I don't think that you can ever say that in order to save one person's life, you have to kill another person. I mean, I guess with like conjoined twins, maybe, but I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. You're free to disagree with me, but I don't buy it. But when it comes to viability, the Supreme Court actually went about, I believe it's 28 weeks. Let me make sure I look it up. Supreme Court. The point of viability, I believe, was 28 weeks. That's absurd. Yeah, so the Supreme Court says that conventional medical wisdom was that the point of viability is some point between 24 and 28 weeks of gestation. Today, there are teenagers walking around who were born at 20 weeks, a couple days gestation. They're born. They've now become teenagers. Right? Some of them are now in college. So we're not talking about modern advancements. These are from the 90s, from the early 2000s. Kids, babies who were born at just over 20 weeks gestation have now grown into adults. And Joe Biden's over here saying that he supports the right to have an abortion up until the point of delivery, which means you go into the hospital, you're in labor, the baby is about to come out into the world, and Democrats say, no, you should be able to kill it. Going way beyond what the Supreme Court said with viability. But if we actually look at what viability means, you cannot take you can't take 1970s technology, medical technology, and apply that to 2020. You just can't. Like fetal NICU, like the ICUs for babies, the NICU, they've advanced tremendously since the 1970s. You can't say that 24 to 28 weeks is true anymore because there are babies being born at 20, 21, 22 weeks gestation and surviving and growing up into be fully functioning adults. So when Joe Biden says that he supports abortion up until the point of delivery, which he very rarely says it, when he says that, that's how radical it is. You cannot be pro-life and vote for Joe Biden. You just cannot. You simply cannot. But there are a lot of people, Kasich calls himself pro-life, and he's still voting for Joe Biden anyway. Square that circle. I dare anyone to square that circle. How can you be pro-life and vote for someone who supports taxpayer funding for abortion? Let's talk about that. Let's get abortion out of the way. And everyone hit the share button, because as soon as I'm talking about this, Facebook's going to throttle us because we're talking about this. Hit that share button. Hit the like button on Facebook, comment on YouTube. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and then the bell for notifications. Taxpayer funding for abortion. You have the Hyde Amendment, which is decades old. Came just after Roe versus Wade. And the Hyde Amendment says that the federal government is not in the business of helping people get elective abortions. It just isn't. So no federal funding can be used for elective abortion procedures. The Hyde Amendment understands that this issue over the years has been so contentious that you can't have the government paying for it. You just can't. Joe Biden unapologetically supports reversing and revoking the Hyde Amendment, meaning that if someone goes into a Planned Parenthood and says, I want an elective abortion, which means the only reason I'm getting an abortion is because I don't want a baby, they can hand them their Medicaid card and the government pays for it. That's what they're supporting. How can you be pro-life and support government-funded abortion? You can't. You can't square the circle. Everyone said, what, you're going to usher in government-funded abortion because you don't like Trump's tweets? Because you think he's a little abrasive? You don't like his tan job? I don't like how he's tanned. I think he should just give up, right? You don't like his hair? He's the Cheeto? So you're going to usher in taxpayer-funded abortion because you don't like how much he tweets. Okay, just don't call yourself a conservative. You can't do it. We're going to be saying this a lot over the hour. You cannot square the circle. You just can't. You can't. Let's talk about gun rights. We have a whole hour of this. Let's talk about gun rights. Kamala Harris supported the position in the 2008 case Heller versus District of Columbia. Kamala Harris supported the position that you do not have a right to own a handgun. We've talked about this. We've talked about this on the show before. There was a case, Heller versus DC. DC law said if you owned a handgun and he was at home, it either needed to be locked in a safe or disassembled, meaning you could not have access to a readily fireable handgun legally. If you did, it was illegal. That was challenged in court and said, how can this be constitutional? You can't tell everyone that they have to have their gun locked up at all times or disassembled, then they can't defend themselves. The lower courts ultimately tried to hold that the leftists on the bench tried to hold that yes, it's constitutional because you don't have a right to own a gun, and that right only applies to the militia. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and a 5-4 ruling with Justice Kennedy as the swing vote The Supreme Court says no. You have a right to own a gun. You have a right to own any firearm that is understandably useful in militia service, which includes a handgun. Anything in common use at the time, you have the right to own. So the question is, Kamala Harris at that point was saying that that was wrong. She was supporting the idea that when the founders wrote the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, they were talking about the National Guard. That's how close we came to losing our Second Amendment rights. There's a 5-4 vote. If Justice Kennedy had flipped the other way, there would be no right to own a gun. The Second Amendment would have been reinterpreted to refer to the National Guard. Kamala Harris supported that position. Joe Biden was asked, are you coming for people's guns? Should people be worried that you're coming for their guns? And he looked right in the camera and he said, bingo. He said, bingo. He then clarified, I just mean assault weapons. Assault weapons. The problem is that the definition of an assault weapon has changed over the years. They introduced this definition, which I think included like 30 some odd actual makes and models of firearms. And you look at the latest version, and it includes well over 100, I think it's well over 200 at this point, identified makes and models of guns that you cannot own if their new ban was to go through. The gun that I keep by my nightstand, it's a handgun. It's an FNX 45. Anyone knows what it is? It's an FNX 45. It shoots a 45 ACP bullet, has a 15-round magazine. That gun that I have locked in a safe next to my bed with a flashlight on it. Actually, I also have a bayonet attachment for it. That's pretty sick. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but right now the flashlight's on it. That handgun would be illegal under a Biden assault weapon ban because it has a threaded barrel. It has a threaded barrel, and it has a rail underneath the barrel that allows you to attach a flashlight. So under Joe Biden's definition of an assault weapon, my self-defense nightstand handgun would be an illegal assault weapon because it can accept a suppressor and it can accept a second grip. Now, you can't legally put a second foregrip on a pistol unless you get approval from the ATF. You can't do it. What the new assault weapon ban bill would do would say, even if you don't have that, if it's possible to add a grip to a pistol, which would be the little rail underneath the barrel. If you have a rail, that would make it a dangerous assault weapon. Like, no one talks about these things. No one talks about these things that I own a shotgun. It's a hunting shotgun. It was imported into the United States as a hunting shotgun. If Joe Biden gets his way, my hunting shotgun, and you can ask Joe the next time he's on, it's a ridiculous hunting shotgun. It's modeled after an AK-47, but it's a hunting shotgun. It's a Sega 12. Right? Under Joe Biden's definition, my hunting shotgun would be an assault weapon. I mean, it gets crazy. So you can't say that you support the Second Amendment and you're voting for Joe Biden, because if Joe Biden wins, he's going to pick it apart. He's going to pick it apart. Let's talk about this. In the Obama administration, Obama rushed through a regulation in the Social Security Administration that said, and we've talked about this on the show, if you are a beneficiary of Social Security and you check a box on a form that says, hey, I want a friend or family member to be able to access my benefits so they can buy my groceries, they can buy my prescriptions, they can do my errands, whatever. If you check out that box saying that you wanted to have a representative payee assigned, the Obama administration redefined that as an admission of mental defect, meaning that because you checked off that box, you admitted that you are unable to manage your personal affairs. They did this in the VA too. Veterans coming back from war checked off the box that, yeah, I want my girlfriend to be able to manage my affairs. They said, okay, thank you. Oh, by the way, you just admitted that you're mentally defective because you're unable to manage your own affairs. Therefore, you have no right to own a firearm. That was an Obama-era regulation. And Joe Biden is promising to try and reimpose it. Now, the good thing is Congress revoked it. And by using the Congressional Review Act, not only did they revoke it, technically by law, it cannot be reimposed. Now, Democrats could always find a way to get around it, but right now they cannot reimpose it. But Joe Biden's promising to try. So you cannot be pro-gun and vote for Joe Biden. You just can't. You just can't, right? And this is how insane this has become. For decades, Democrats have been saying, you don't need a gun. The police are there to protect you. And now they want to defund the police. So what's that mean for us? For decades, they've been saying American citizens don't need these firearms. That's for police. And then the next breath, now they're saying police don't need those firearms. Can't be pro-gun and vote for Joe Biden. You just can't. You cannot square the circle. You just can't. Let's go through it. Go ahead, Mr. Producer. Let's go ahead and put up my screen. This is what Joe Biden calls bold ideas. Bold ideas. It's so bold that he didn't even write them. Let's find some bits to go after. Tale of two tax policies. Here we go. Let's click on the tax policies. Ooh, tale of two tax policies. Oh, get out of here, donation button. Do not donate to Joe Biden's campaign. So he's making the claim that 83% of Trump's tax giveaway went to the top 1% of earners. We talked about this on the show yesterday. This idea that he wants to reverse the Trump tax cuts. Next year, I'm about to bring a second child. My wife is. We're about to welcome our second child into the family. Under the Trump tax code, the Trump tax cuts, it doubled our child tax credit. So right there, next year, we will get $2,000 extra back from the government to be able to write it off that we wouldn't have had before the Trump tax cuts went into effect. So when Joe Biden says he wants to, on day one, revoke the Trump tax cuts, he's talking about every single family of four automatically loses $2,000. How is that conservative? How is raising taxes conservative? It isn't. You can't say it is. You can't say that you're a fiscal conservative and you're voting for Joe Biden, because he's going to usher in the biggest segment of tax and spend policies that we've ever seen. He is not a fiscal conservative. He's not a moderate. He's promising everything. Democrats always do this. Promising everything. You can't be a fiscal conservative. You can't be for lower taxes and vote for Joe Biden. You just can't. Oh, but Trump tweets. Have you heard that Trump tweets? Who gives a crap? Who cares? If the president of the United States tweets, I don't care. He's getting the job done. He's doing what he said he would do. Let's go ahead and take this off the screen. Yesterday, Joe Biden, and actually, Mr. Producer, I'll send you this video clip. Mr. Producer, if you go to our YouTube channel, it'll be the most recent video after our live stream right now. It should be, yeah, let me send it to you. It should be right there. If you can pull that up and put it on the screen, that'd be great. I'm also sending you a link right now. Yesterday, Joe Biden was asked again whether he would pack the Supreme Court if he was elected. Asked again, point blank. And he refused to answer. He just refused to answer. Actually, that's not true. The answer he gave was that he's not going to tell you. He won't tell you until after the election what his position on court packing is. Mr. Producer, do we have that? Do we have that clip? If not, I can keep. I see setting it up now. Okay, so that's terrifying, right? Because if the answer is no, I'm not going to pack the Supreme Court, it's a very easy answer to give. And Joe Biden says, oh, if I give that answer, then that's all the headlines are going to talk about. No. If your position is that you're not going to radically redefine the Supreme Court, it will not be a headline-grabbing statement. The only reason to be afraid of answering it is if the answer is yes. Let's go ahead and play that cut from yesterday with Joe Biden.
The rest of the world, look, some of you have covered international politics before. The rest of the world's looking at us. It's an embarrassment. It's a pure embarrassment. Gotta stop. They'll know my opinion of court packing when the election is over. Now look, I know it's a great question, y'all, and I don't blame you for asking it. But you know, the moment I answer that question, the headline in every one of your papers will be about that. Other than focusing on what's happening now. The election has begun. There's never been a...
You heard what he just said. I'll tell you my position on court packing once the election is over. You cannot be a conservative and vote for this man. You can't do it. Again, if the answer was, I'm not going to pack the Supreme Court, I'm not going to give up 150 years of precedent and add extra liberal judges to the Supreme Court, if the answer is no, he can just say it. There's no controversy other than pissing off his leftist base. There's no controversy. It's not a headline stealer like he says. The only reason it would steal headlines and distract from his other messages is if the answer is yes, which is obviously why he won't say it, why Kamala Harris won't say it. Let's talk about what it means to pack the Supreme Court. To pack the Supreme Court is to say, I don't like the way the Supreme Court is set up ideologically. I am going to keep adding judges of my political persuasion until I get a majority that I support. So instead of what Donald Trump did, which is when vacancies become available, he appoints people that he supports. And yes, in the case of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that is an ideological flip. Instead of waiting for someone like Justice Clarence Thomas to retire or, unfortunately, to pass away, instead of waiting for that, they want to just pack the court. So we're not going to wait for a vacancy. We're just going to keep throwing extra justices on the court. And if they don't rule the way we want them, we'll keep doing it even more. That is why Joe Biden will not answer that question. So you cannot be a conservative, because what he's talking about is adding enough liberal justice to the Supreme Court that they will never issue a conservative opinion ever again. Like, don't think they're just going to stop at 2. Don't think they're just going to stop at 2 justices. If they really want to take over the Supreme Court, they'll add 6. They'll add 7. Right? They'll take it up to 15 justices, and they'll add 6 more leftists. And you will never have a small government ruling. You will never have a religious freedom ruling. You will never have a pro-gun ruling. You will never have a border security ruling. You will never have any of it. It'll be big government, Constitution being a living, breathing document, reinterpreting what the Founding Fathers wrote to give new benefits, new privileges to people. That's what you get. Joe Biden is not even pretending anymore. He will not tell you his position because that's how radical it is. He knows it is radical, and he knows it is finished. He's finished if he tells you. Again, our number, 888-441-1121. Feel free to call in. Let us know whether you think it's possible for a conservative to be a conservative and also vote for Joe Biden. I sure don't. I sure as hell don't. Let's ask, is it possible to be a Christian? Someone just posted that. Karen just posted that in the Facebook comment section. You can't be a Christian and vote for Joe. That's an interesting question. Can you be a Christian? I mean, obviously, you can do whatever you want. You can vote whatever you want. I have a big problem with Catholics voting for Joe Biden. I'm a Catholic. We went through his pro-life positions. I have a real hard time with someone being a Catholic saying that Joe Biden's the man for them. Listen, you can do what you want. You can do what you want. The problem is that it makes you a hypocrite, right? when Joe Biden's like trying to talk about Christian theology, right? He's not a Christian. How can you be going after the Christian vote when you support the position like what we saw in California, where it's illegal to go to church? Right now, we covered this a couple days ago on the podcast. Right now in New York, they are instituting COVID lockdowns, full lockdowns in 9 zip codes. The way New York City runs is the zip codes are butted right against each other, where it's literally one side of the street is in one zip code, the other side of the street's in another zip code. You have situations in New York where it is okay to go to a mosque on one side of the street, but you go a block over in a church, you can't go there. Where you can't go in this synagogue, but if you go a couple subway stops up, you can go to a different synagogue. You can't say that you are a Christian and vote for a man who wants to bring us back to these lockdowns where you're not even allowed to go to church. I mean, right now there are churches in California that are facing 6-figure fines. I kid you not, 6-figure fines. Why? Because they opened their doors and they dared to sing. Think about that for a second. They sung. They sang. Yeah, sang. They sang in church. Now, you say, oh, well, Max, don't you know it's singing spreads COVID-19 worse than talking? First of all, that's horseshit and you know it. But second of all, even if it does, even if the act of singing, I mean, some of these regulations in California, we've covered them on past episodes. Some of the regulations are so ridiculous that it actually says you cannot play a woodwind instrument. Just think about that. You cannot play a clarinet because clarinets spread the virus worse than trumpets. I mean, it doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense. We covered it a while ago on the show, too. There was a woman in an orchestra wearing a mask, and there was a slit in the mask for her to be able to put the reed for her clarinet into her mouth. What's the point of wearing a mask if you're going to cut a hole in it? There's no point in it. But you can't say that you're a Christian when you're voting for a political party that literally wants to make church illegal because of a respiratory virus, of which even in the worst age categories, over 95% of people who get it survive. Right? Even if you're over 70, it's almost a 96% survival rate. If you're under 70, it's over 98, even in the upper echelons of that age bracket. Yeah. People saying, what about the church service where they tried to do outside and cops tried to stop it? I think it was in Alabama. It was in definitely a state in the South where pastors were inside the church and they were doing service. They had a radio broadcast and people drove into the parking lot, sat in their cars to listen, and they got ticketed for it. And that wasn't California. That was in the South. They got ticketed for it. But just imagine, let's go back to the singing. You can't sing in church because singing is worse than talking. Yeah, it's like a pro-Trump rally is worse than the Black Lives Matter rally. It doesn't make any sense. They target it because they don't want people to actually have any religious views. There's a whole book in the Bible called Psalms. The Psalms are literally songs. And you go through all the different sects of Christianity, and pretty much all of them say that prayer is much more powerful when it's sung than when it's spoken. That's why the Psalms are meant to be sung. That's why even when a priest or a pastor, even when they can't sing for their life, even when they're completely out of tune, right? And you're like, wow, he's bad. Even when they can't hold a tune if their life depended on it, they still try to sing it because they know it's more powerful when sung, especially more powerful when sung as a community. That's why the cantors put their hand up and they lead everyone in song, because that idea of everyone singing the Psalms together is literally the most powerful way to pray. But the liberals say no, you can't do that. You can whisper. But only 10 people can be inside if you whisper. How can you be a Christian and vote for Joe Biden? How can you be a Christian and vote for a Democrat when that party says you're not allowed to go to church, and if you go, you're not allowed to sing? There's no logic there. They just don't want people to go to church. And let's talk about Judaism. Because what we saw this week, and we played it, what we saw this week from Governor Andrew Cuomo was anti-Semitism on display. It was absolute anti-Semitism. He looked right into the camera and he warned Jews that if they go to synagogue, he's going to shut them down. If they go to a funeral, he's going to shut them down. And he's talking about the Orthodox Jews, Hasidic Jews. The argument that, the Jews are responsible for the outbreak. Where have we heard that before? Where have we heard big government tyrants look into a camera or speak into a microphone and say that the problem society is going through wouldn't exist if the Jews weren't there? Where have we heard that? Anyone have any guesses? When was the last time we heard a big government tyrant blame something on the Jews? And ask yourself, what followed? What followed after that big government tyrant said, this new problem that society is facing, the Jews are responsible? Is that what we want in this country? Is it? Really? So in Orthodox Judaism, there is a concept, it's actually a rule. It's called a Minion, M-I-N-Y-A-N. It's not in Hebrew, but it's Minion. And what that means, and not every sect of Judaism believes in this, but what a Minion is in order to perform certain services in Judaism, and I believe anyone who's Jewish listening, they can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's a bris, it's a wedding, and it's a funeral. And there's a couple other in between. But what they say in certain Orthodox sects of Judaism is that you need a minyan. You need a minimum of 10 men over the age of 13 to be present for there to be a quorum and for the religious service to continue. So you can, in certain sects of Judaism, you cannot bury someone without 10 men being present. It's a weird rule, but that's their faith. They live it, that's their faith. So if you're in one of these Orthodox sects and a husband passes away, and the government says you can only have 10 people present at a funeral, what does that mean? That means in order for the husband to go into the ground, his wife, his widow, can't be there. Because if she's there, that would mean that she's the one woman, and it can be a maximum of 9 men. They don't have the quorum. They don't have a minyan. They actually can't perform the service. That's how radical this is. When Cuomo's saying, nope, 10 people, that's it. And that was going on throughout the pandemic. Nope, you only have 10 people. Literally, there are sects of Judaism where you could not have a bris, you could not have a wedding, you could not have a funeral. Because Andrew Cuomo in his governor's mansion decided he didn't want you to. And every time Cuomo was called out on this, he said, the religious leaders support it. That doesn't mean anything. Listen, we have a First Amendment for a reason. The Founding Fathers put the First Amendment first just to make sure there was no debate over it. If we want to have the conversation about changing the Constitution to allow for religious liberties to be suspended anytime there's a respiratory virus going around, we can have that discussion. But I promise you, I'm going to fight with everything I got to make sure that the other side loses. But don't come here and say that it's completely constitutional to say that a Jewish man can't be buried according to his faith because of a virus. Really? Like right now in New York, there are a bunch of Catholic schools that have now closed. I want to say it's into double digits. Let me look it up. The Catholic schools in New York have closed. Why? Because they don't have the money. And the reason they don't have the money is twofold. They don't have the registrations. People aren't registering their kids for school because there's e-learning. And the Catholic Church was not prepared for e-learning, doesn't have the budget for e-learning, right? So people just have not enrolled in Catholic Church. The other reason is that it's been illegal to go to church in New York. So they can't actually have church services. They can't pass the basket row to row down the pews and collect money to help fund the school system. Let me look it up real quick so I make sure I get the right numbers. Catholic schools close, New York. New York, Catholic schools closing in New York, 28. They announced that 28 Catholic schools are closing. What that's going to mean is that if you still want to go to Catholic school in New York, you're going to have to travel across the city. You have to travel. You're not going to be able to just go to your local one. You're going to have to go into another school. Why? Because they weren't allowed to fundraise. They weren't allowed to fundraise. They said, no, you cannot have in-person masses. You cannot fundraise for your school district. You're done. And the result is there are now 28 fewer Catholic schools going into this school year than there were last year. Can't say that's constitutional because it's literally on government orders that's why they're closing. So no, you cannot be a Christian. You cannot be a Catholic. You cannot be a man of faith and vote for Joe Biden. For all of the above. You just can't. You just can't. You cannot support Made in America and vote for Joe Biden. It's amazing. Joe Biden has started to share this Made in America. He's actually just plagiarizing Donald Trump, which thank goodness Mike Pence called him out on it. He's just plagiarizing it at this point. He's saying, oh, I'm going to be a Made in America president. Joe Biden voted for NAFTA. Joe Biden supported China entering the World Trade Organization. Joe Biden supported all of the things that helped suck jobs out of America. Joe Biden supports open borders. How can you be pro-American worker when you're also pro-open, if you vote for someone that's for open borders, right? One of the reasons that we've seen such great job gains under Donald Trump in African-American community, in Hispanic community, right? One of the reasons that we've seen such amazing job gains prior to the pandemic is because Donald Trump was enforcing immigration law. No one is hurt more by open borders than African-American workers, Hispanic workers, right? People who don't have a high school degree or only have a high school degree, they are the ones who are hurt most by open borders because companies would much rather pay someone under the table far less than have to pay them a living wage. So that's one of the reasons that we've seen job growth in those communities because Donald Trump has enforced immigration law, right? Less illegal immigration, less people coming in to take those jobs. How can you support American workers when you also support open borders? You can't. You can't. And Joe Biden wants to take down the wall. Kamala Harris wants to take down the wall. How can you support victims of sex trafficking, human trafficking, when you want to undo the very protections that Donald Trump put into place to fight back against that? How can you do that? Pulling up a picture. I want to try and find this picture. Here we go. 1 second, Mr. Producer. Years ago, Kamala Harris actually went to the border fence. Okay, you can go ahead and put up my screen. Years ago, Kamala Harris actually went. It was actually in 2011. There you can see Kamala Harris in the front taking a photograph in front of the border fence, which now is much taller in that area, surrounded by U.S. Border Patrol, other local police, ICE agents, and the like. That was Kamala Harris in 2011. Kamala Harris is a political chameleon. She will do and say anything that she thinks she needs to say to get elected. You could never catch her within 100 yards of a border fence now. She wouldn't go in there and support that, but that was in support of human trafficking fighting, drug trafficking fighting. That's why she took that photo. You can't say that you are you support cracking down on drug trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, when you also want to take down the border fence? I'm going to take that off my screen now. You can't do it. You can't do it. You can't square the circle. You just can't. You can't say that you're going to make healthcare more affordable for Americans when you also raised your hand on a debate stage and promised to give free healthcare to illegal aliens. You just can't, right? If every illegal alien has government-funded healthcare, and if we are all forced into that government-funded healthcare system, our healthcare becomes more expensive because those illegal aliens would get health benefits without necessarily paying into the system. And I say, oh, well, that already happens. Yeah, it happens on an emergency basis. Absolutely. It does. Illegal aliens go to hospitals, they have procedures on an emergency basis, and they don't pay the bill, and that cost ends up being basically given to everyone else. Everyone else's bill is a little bit higher because they didn't pay on an emergency basis. Imagine if they can do the same for preventative care. Imagine if they can go in and say, this is an emergency, but I want to have X, Y, and Z done, right? It'd be astronomically more expensive. Like right now, we're talking about just an emergency basis. If an illegal alien woman is in labor and she needs to have a baby, yes, the hospital will help bring the baby into the world. And if she can't pay, that either gets written off as bad debt, and even if it does, it ends up being billed to everyone else, right? The hospital is not going to go bankrupt because people won't pay their bills. They just charge everyone a little bit more. But if you have Joe Biden's plan, and all of a sudden they have preventative care, all of a sudden you're giving them free prescriptions, right? Of course it's going to be more expensive for us. Of course it is. Does anyone actually think that you can give millions of illegal aliens complete government-funded healthcare and we're not going to pay a cent for it? Are we really that naive to believe that? Of course we will. But that's how stupid this has gotten. He stands up on stage and says, I'm going to give illegal aliens government-funded healthcare, and the idiots clap. Oh, why? Because Donald Trump tweets. Can't have, no, Trump tweeted, so nope, burn it all down. Trump tweets. Oh, I hate those tweets. That's what we're talking about. I mean, it's freaking crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but that's what we're dealing with. People are actually going to vote for Joe Biden, conservatives, because they're not conservatives, but they'll vote for him because they don't like his tweeting. They don't like what he says, what he does. They don't like his demeanor. It's so stupid. Let's go back to my screen. Let's look at some other things that Joe Biden is talking about. Let's see. Yeah, coronavirus plan is just a complete copy off of Donald Trump's. Let's go to veterans. Let's see what he says about veterans. Load. So he's saying Donald Trump has repeatedly failed our veterans. Wow. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. So he's criticizing Donald Trump for allowing his wealthy Mar-a-Lago friends to drive veterans policy. The interesting thing is that Donald Trump actually for years has opened up Mar-a-Lago to injured veterans so that they could go and they could have a day. I think he did 1 or 2 days a year where any injured veteran could just show up to his private club, play golf, use the pool, use any of the resources. Just come on in. Come on in. It's amazing that Joe Biden is criticizing him and using Mar-a-Lago to do it. It's very, very stupid. But it was under Joe Biden that literally, we covered this before we had a podcast. We had our Fax Blast alerts. For anyone who doesn't know, there's links in the description. Please do sign up for our email newsletter. We do much more than just the podcast. We also are one of the biggest advocacy organizations in the country, pressuring Congress to make sure that Republicans hold the line and we stop Democrat policies from being enacted. During the Obama years, one of the things that was happening was veterans were trying to get treatment at the VA. And they were being told, I'm sorry, it's about 3 months out. Can't get you in for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. There were veterans who were trying to get mental health care who were being told, sorry, we don't have time to fit you in. Come back in a couple months. And they were walking out into the parking lot of the VA hospital and they were killing themselves. That is not an exaggeration. That happened. That happened. Veterans actually killed themselves in the VA hospital parking lots because they were told they couldn't have an appointment because it was years out. We then find out that one of the reasons, not for all of them, but one of the reasons that a lot of these people were given later times was because the employees didn't want to make it look like they were swamped, right? They were actually cooking the books. They were cooking the books to make it look like they were doing more work than they actually were, to make it look like instead of actually being swamped, that they had things just nicely scheduled out. So one of the reasons that veterans killed themselves in the parking lot of these VA hospitals is because the employees didn't want to get caught doing a bad job and wanted just to create the illusion that they were doing a good job. They didn't care that people died in the process. They were just looking out for themselves. So I have no sympathy for Joe Biden whatsoever because he was vice president then, and he could have stepped in and stopped it. He didn't. It took Donald Trump to do it, to pass more VA choice, right? To actually give the president of the United States the power to fire people responsible. Obama learned about this VA scandal. He learned about it. Instead of saying, Congress, I need to give me the power to fire these people, the Obama administration, including Joe Biden, said, oh, well, the law says we can't follow them. We can't fire them. So we're just going to have to let them keep working? Sorry. Trump said, that's crap. Fix the law. Congress fixed the law. And now people who are caught abusing, hurting our vets are fired, promptly fired. You got to take that off the screen, Mr. Producer. Promptly fired. So I don't want to hear that Joe Biden is better for vets. He isn't. No way in hell is Joe Biden better for vets. Veterans today have, it's something like over a 90% approval of the VA. That was unheard of during the Obama years. People were dying with preventable, curable diseases because the VA was so backlogged. And a lot of those backlogs were deliberately caused by VA employees who just didn't want to do the work, didn't want to get caught with a backlog, right? It was they literally caught people saying, okay, yeah, you want an appointment, okay, and they never actually entered them into the appointment books because they didn't want to look like they were actually treating a lower percentage. They wanted to artificially inflate their numbers by hiding people on secret ledgers. It's insane. It's insane. You can't tell me that you support veterans. You can't tell me that you support veterans while you also support Joe Biden. You just can't. You just can't. I mean, we go down the list. You look at rural America. How can you possibly support Joe Biden if you live in rural America, if you're a farmer? You can't support Joe Biden if you're a farmer. Are you insane? Are you absolutely insane? Like, Donald Trump has actually signed trade deals with China and other countries to get them to buy more American produce. And yes, there was a trade war. You know what Donald Trump did? He used the tariffs from the trade war to backfill and to pay the farmers who were hurt by it. So don't tell me that Joe Biden is better for farmers. I mean, remember what Michael Bloomberg said? Like, farmers are stupid. Oh, what is it? You just have to dig a hole, put a seed in it, water it, and ta-da. I mean, that's what the left actually thinks about farmers. And we see what's happening. You talk about suburban America. Donald Trump is absolutely right. And they're actually criticizing Donald Trump for going after the Obama administration's policy with the suburbs. I forget what the actual acronym was. There was a lot of F's. I think there was a Y in the acronym. But it was an Obama administration policy that would have required cities and towns to actually bring in more low-income housing from the cities. Which, listen, there's no problem with low-income housing. If you want to build low-income housing, do it. But for the government to come in and require that cities and towns build more low-income housing, there's going to be consequences for that. And I'm not saying that anyone who lives in low-income housing is a bad person, but when you take a city and town in the suburbs that have been built up, people have invested in their homes, they have property values, and all of a sudden you start saying, okay, you need to build X number of low-income housing units. Oh, and you have to do it right across the street because we need to make sure that all this area is very diverse. It was literally artificially diversifying the suburbs. If that plan would have went through, yes, home prices in those areas would have plummeted. Right now in my town, they're trying to build a Section 8 low-income housing. You could stand on my roof, you hit a golf ball, and it probably bounce a couple times and land on where they want to put Section 8 low-income housing. I don't have any problem with you want to build apartment units, but you can't just force someone to do that. It has to be the town that decides whether you want this to happen, because make no mistake, when you start importing people into the suburbs from the city, you also inevitably will import the same problems that the city experiences, drugs, crime, right? Also, there was towns where they were going to bring in so many low-income housing units, it would have flipped the politics of the town. Instead of having a Republican-controlled city council, instead of having school choice people on the school boards, you start bringing in low-income housing units and filling them with people from the cities, you inevitably will start getting more Democrat candidates. All of a sudden, your school board has completely flipped. All of a sudden, your local city council has completely flipped. All of a sudden, then your police are defunded. And you start looking around like, what the hell's going on? Property taxes go up to pay for all the lunacy. Home values go down because people don't want to live next to low-income housing. I mean, that's the whole point of the suburbs. You don't want to live next to, in the city, you don't want to live next to the projects. That's why you move into the suburbs, to be away from all that. So yeah, if the Obama administration's plan had gone through, then yes, they would have destroyed the suburbs. It would have destroyed the suburbs. Trump gets a hard time for saying it, but it absolutely would have. It absolutely would have. So you can't say you're for rural America, you're for suburban America. I almost said suburban. You're for suburban America. You can't say you're for that and vote for Joe Biden because he wants to destroy all of it. He just does. It's just, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when you see these Republicans coming out and saying, well, Trump was mean to me personally, so I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. I mean, you can't say that you're for peace and vote for Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the only president in the modern era not to get us into a new military conflict during his presidency. Go back, think through the years. Find the last president who was in office who didn't put boots on the ground into a new country. Can you name any? You have to go back pretty damn far. Obama was the drone strike in chief, putting us into Libya. Obama got us into Syria. Bush, I don't even think we need to talk about that, right? Clinton, Kosovo. Bush the first, Iraq. Reagan. Look at all the stuff Reagan did fighting communism. He was all over the place. Right? Carter actually tried to do a rescue mission in Iran. He actually put troops in Iran to try and rescue hostages. Yeah, go back to Carter. Keep going back. You can't find one. Once you keep going back, you start getting to the Vietnam War. You start going to the Korean War, World War II, World War I. Right? Find me another president who has not committed U.S. ground forces into a new war. You can't. I mean, people saying Eisenhower, I have to look it up. I think Eisenhower did approve. No, Eisenhower, didn't he approve something in Suez? I think he did. I think he approved something in Egypt. We'd have to look at it. You can't. Trump in the modern era, absolutely. The only president who has not gotten us into a new war. And like, oh, all the peaceniks are for Biden. Are you serious? Are you serious? Joe Biden has rubber stamped all the wars I just talked about. It's insane. But no, the hippies for Biden. Hippies for Biden. Now, why? Because Trump tweets. Doesn't matter that Trump says that every single troop is now scheduled to be home from Afghanistan by Christmas. It doesn't matter. Trump tweets. That's why we want Joe Biden. Joe Biden's actually talking about putting the troops back in Afghanistan, back in Iraq. It's insane. Absolutely insane. You can't say that you are for Israel if you're for Joe Biden, because Donald Trump is the most pro-Israel president we've ever had. He moved the embassy back to Jerusalem. He now has secured Middle East peace. Now, it's not finalized. You still have the Palestinians to work with. But for decades, all the Arab countries have refused to even acknowledge that Israel existed. They literally, when Israel would come up to speak at the United Nations, the Arab countries would get up and leave because they don't even recognize it as a country. National airlines taking off from Arab countries would not land in Israel because they didn't even acknowledge that there was an airstrip there. They didn't even acknowledge that was it Ben Gurion Airport. They didn't even acknowledge it existed. So literally, Arab pilots, when they got into trouble, rerouted somewhere else, even if Israel was the closest, because they just refused to acknowledge it. Now you have deals being signed between Israel and other Arab countries, acknowledging that they exist and agreeing to work together to fix other problems in the region. Iran. Yeah, the Palestinians aren't going to be happy about it. Of course they're not going to be happy about it, right? The Palestinians want to drive Israel into the sea. They're still stuck. You know, what is it, the 7 Days War? They're still in that mindset of let's try and push Israel into the sea. Joe Biden supports that Palestinian mindset, not literally pushing Israel into the sea, but giving Israeli land back to Palestinians, right? Punishing Israel. Right before Obama left office, there was a vote in the United Nations to condemn Israeli settlements. And the Obama administration shocked the world by abstaining. They allowed it to pass because the Obama administration refused to use their veto. That's what you will get if Joe Biden wins. You will have an America, you have a United States of America, just like in the final days of the Obama administration, unwilling to stand up for Israel. You have a Biden administration unwilling to stand up to Iran. They always talk about the Iran nuclear deal. Iran will have, if Joe Biden wins, Iran will have a nuclear weapon before Joe Biden leaves office. Why? Because the Iran nuclear deal allows it, right? It was never to prevent Iran from ever getting a nuclear weapon. They gave Iran the store in exchange for Iran promising to not make nuclear weapons for like 10, 15, 20 years. And what has Iran been doing? They've been enriching uranium. They now, I think the breakout time for Iran is 3 months. 3 months. If Iran wanted to say, screw that, if Iran said, screw that, I'm done, I'm not in the deal anymore, they would have a functional nuclear bomb in 3 months. That's what the Obama administration left us with. So yeah, Donald Trump is pissed about that. You can't say that it's a great deal when Iran's breakout time actually gets a little bit shorter than it was when they started. But that's what Joe Biden wants to put us back in it. Let's talk about the Paris Climate Accords. We don't have a whole lot of time. Someone just mentioned in the comment section. Let's talk about that. What is the Paris Climate Accord? The Paris Climate Accord is an agreement. It's actually, it's a wealth redistribution agreement. Basically, it says that the United States will pay in, I think at the time it was $3 billion. $3 billion that we were supposed to pay into the Paris Climate Accords. $3 billion. And what that was going to do is that was going to be redistributed to other countries to help them modernize their industry, modernize their power grid. So the United States would pay to help other countries advance their industrial sectors. Obama was able to get 2 payments of $500 million out the door before Donald Trump came to office. He wasn't rushing because he assumed that Hillary Clinton would win and she'd be able to make the final $2 billion in payments afterwards. He was only able to rush through $1 billion. But Donald Trump left the agreement and said, listen, we are actually reducing our emissions. China, it considers China to be a developing nation. So the United States would actually be contributing to help China. Like American taxpayers would be sending money to the UN, which would be sending it to China to help China modernize their factories. What's the result? More manufacturing jobs getting sucked out of the United States. Like, why should American taxpayers pay for India to modernize their manufacturing facilities? It's just insane. Absolutely insane. When you actually look at the deal, there was no requirement that China actually do anything. I think it was for another 5 years. China didn't actually have to do anything about emissions at all. So we were paying into them, modernizing their whole industry without any actual clawback provision if China didn't meet certain levels of emissions cuts. It's insane. It's not an environmental deal. It's just an attempt to redistribute American wealth overseas to other countries that the United Nations feels are more fit, more deserving of the money. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Down the list, you can't say you're a conservative and vote for Joe Biden. You can't. Just get rid of the facade. Stop pretending. You cannot be a conservative because Joe Biden is against everything that it means to be a conservative. And you can say, well, listen, Donald Trump isn't a perfect conservative either. Fine. But Ronald Reagan had a famous saying that if someone agrees with you 80% of the time, they're not 20% your enemy, they're 80% your ally. I may have gotten the numbers messed up. But the idea is that if someone agrees with you on the majority of things, don't look at the small number that you disagree on. Look at the part that you agree on. You can't say that as a conservative about Joe Biden. You can't say, well, I only disagree with him on a little bit. I actually support majority of what he's saying. Joe Biden's like, we're fighting for the soul of America. What? You can't say you're fighting for the soul of America if you won't even let people go to church to save their own souls. Sorry. Oops, said it. Can't say that you're fighting for the soul of the nation when you are completely okay with churches, synagogues, and mosques being shut down indefinitely. Can't say it. Can't say it. Well, let me know what you think in the comment section. I've went through most of it. I mean, I could be here for 2-3 hours going through all of Joe Biden's positions. But every time I look at it, I read what he actually wants to do, and I ask myself, how can you be a conservative and vote for this man? If you call yourself a conservative and you're going to vote for him, fine. Just stop calling yourself a conservative. right? And it reminds me of like the Never Trumpers back from 2016, which I'm glad to hear that Glenn Beck has seen the error of his ways because he was leading a lot of that. Donald Trump almost lost because of Never Trumpers, right? You look at what's Trump calling McMuffin, the third party. He ended up failing, but there was a push within the Republican Party to have Trump lose because they would have preferred a Hillary Clinton presidency over a Donald Trump presidency. Why? Because they would much rather be against something than actually have to get stuff done. It's true. There are Republicans who would rather be an opposition party than have to be a majority party, have to be a ruling party. They would rather Hillary Clinton win than Trump have won. Like there are Republicans who voted against Trump. I kid you not, because they didn't like his position on eminent domain. Think about how crazy of a person you have to be to look at Joe Biden and to look at Donald Trump and to say you're going to vote for Joe Biden because you don't like President Donald Trump's position on eminent domain. Eminent domain is the idea that if the government is building a highway and the only way they can build the highway is through your property, that you have to give up your property for fair market value. Donald Trump as president, he's not doing things with eminent domain. It's just not in the president's purview. It's not what he does. But there is a non-zero number of true conservatives who will be voting for Joe Biden because they disagree over Trump's position of eminent domain. They're not a conservative. You're not actually conservative if you're going to vote for someone who supports third trimester abortion because you don't like his zoning policies, his eminent domain policies. You don't like how he tweets. You don't like his hair. You don't like his spray tan. You think he's a little bit too brash. He's a little bit too mean. So you're gonna vote for everything you say you're against. And I'll end it with this. People keep asking me, leftists keep asking me. I don't know why they keep asking me because I keep having the same answer. They say, what would it take for you to vote against Trump? What would it take for you to vote for Joe Biden? And I tell them nothing. There is nothing that can happen, that you can do, that Donald Trump can do, that Joe Biden can do. There's nothing that can drag me to vote for Joe Biden because I will not vote for someone who is pro-death, not pro-choice, pro-death, who is anti-gun, who is pro-big government, who wants to raise my taxes, right? Who is anti-religion, who is pro-lockdown. There's just nothing. There's nothing that you can do to make me vote for Joe Biden. I will crawl across broken glass. I will walk on hot coals to make sure that I'm able to cast my vote for Donald Trump. And it doesn't make me a bad person. It actually makes me a good person because I have principles, I have beliefs, and they're actually real. When I tell you I'm a pro-life voter, I will not vote for someone who is not pro-life. It doesn't make me a coward the way the left says, oh, you're a coward. You're voting for Trump. You're a cult. You're in a cult. No, actually, we have positions that we feel firmly about, and I'd be a coward if I threw everything I've ever believed in out the window because I don't like a tweet. Sorry, there is nothing that will stop me from voting for Trump. There is nothing that will get me to cast the ballot for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is precisely what conservatives have warned about for years. This wolf in sheep's clothing, this moderate, so-called moderate, who will be 78 when he's inaugurated, right? The so-called moderate picks a running mate who is the most liberal senator in the United States Senate. Literally, did you see this last week? Joe Biden, this week, after Kamala Harris's debate, Joe Biden actually said on camera, she was pretty presidential, huh? Does anyone really think that Joe Biden would be calling the shots? I mean, part of this thing that Nancy Pelosi is doing today is to create a mechanism for Congress to remove Joe Biden so that Kamala Harris can be president. But this is absolutely a wolf in sheep's clothing situation. This is what we've been warning about. This idea of a moderate trying to convince people to vote for him when his positions are as left as they come. Carl just wrote in the comment section on Facebook, were you able to get your registration vote straightened out? Yes. Yes, I did. I called them up. They said it was pending, so they received it. I should be getting my card in the mail this week. But yes, thank you. It was very painful. It took way too long for me to get that worked out. But yeah, no, if anyone who tells you they're a conservative and they're voting for Joe Biden, they are not a conservative. And it's up to all of us to make sure that we have those conversations with these people before their ballot gets put in the mail or before they go to the polls. Because people need to understand what they're voting for, why, what will actually happen if they cast that ballot for Kamala Harris. People need to know. Can't say you're pro-life, can't say you're pro-gun, can't do it. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. Happy Friday, everyone. Remember that in addition to the online version of the podcast where we go live Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, we also have the audio versions. Please do check that out. If you have an iPhone, please, or a MacBook, please do check out the link to leave us a review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really do need the help. It'll help us get up in the rankings. We're hovering around 120 right now in the Apple Podcast rankings. We want to get into the top 100. The only way we do that is by you subscribing on Apple Podcasts, listening on Apple Podcasts, and leaving reviews. Really do appreciate it. We're also on Google Play. We're also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn, and Podbean, so you can check us out all there. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like and follow our Facebook page. Again, we go live Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern. We also have a link for you to join our email newsletter. Very important in case we get shut down. That's how we're going to keep the show going. There's also a link for you to buy merch on our store, help support the channel. And yes, we are on Parler, so if you follow us at Conservative Daily, I will be happy to follow you back. We're about to hit 2,000 followers on Parler, so you like us on Parler, we will help get over that hump. So I think I said everything. Again, my name is Max McGuire. Joe Otto couldn't be in today, had a meeting, but he should be back first thing next week. So that's going to be it for this episode. Remember that the fight to take back our country clearly isn't over, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together.